Hey all, this is Lisa Marriott. Wanted to tell you about something that I found last night that I found really interesting. So I was looking at Compound Interest, which is an amazing site. If you haven't seen it yet, it's online. It's created by a teacher in the UK, all chemistry, all the time. And so these are some things that came out in March, and I love it because I was looking through, and check out the first one. So DNA copying errors lead to 2/3 of cancer. And when you kind of scroll through and try to look at a little bit more, so they're talking about mutations, and about 2/3 of them are caused by DNA copying errors in cells. And so we've been talking about epigenetics in class, and if a lot of these are caused by DNA copying errors, it made me want to look a little bit more into this. So I found this paper. When you go into the citation, and this takes you to a commentary, so this is in Science, and they're talking about there's a really beautiful correlation between the number of stem cell divisions in an organ and the frequency that cancer develops, and it really depends on the organ system. It can go all the way up to 95%, but the overall average is around 66%. When you look at the original science, this is the correlation. So it's mapped out across 69 countries around the world, and a 0.8. So I mean, that's a pretty solid correlation. And what they found that was really interesting, so what I'm trying to do is bring in the original science as much as possible so you can see the translation of the science to public. I think it's really important. Anyway, so when you move forward, so there's a really solid correlation here. And then when you look at it in the context of epigenetics, which we talked about last week, if epigenetics is a way to change the volume of gene expression, you can turn gene expression up or down. It makes you wonder, all right, so if you're talking about copying errors and how cancer might be caused by copying errors, how is epigenetics influencing this? So we talked about two different ways, through either methylation or acetylation. It doesn't really matter necessarily the mechanism, but you can increase gene expression, and that's what we talked about. So I immediately wanted to know, so how does stress affect epigenetics? And so I looked it up in Google. I highly recommend putting in very simple words first, because that's how the public is finding their information. So if you can find, so I did two of them. One, I went to Nature first, and then when you look at it, it's going to be overwhelming for most people. So they're going to skip that, and they're going to go down to something that's a little bit more manageable. So down below you see, for example, from Psychology Today. And if you click on that, so this is from an MD who went and started looking at it, but essentially what they're saying is that there was a 2013 study that came out, and they were talking about how stress can increase gene expression specifically related to fighting off infections, possibly infections that don't exist. So I highly recommend, once you find that citation, go to the original source. And so this is a beautiful study, and some of the things that make me really happy is that I recognize some of these authors' names. So he does social stress a ton. Bruce McEwen is really, really, really well known for stress, super important. And so what they're showing is that you have this increase in this stress response, and when you have that, it works through these beta adrenergic receptors. So those are your sympathetic, your fight or flight, the ones that we talked about last week. And also, they talk about GM-CSF, and now I recognize that probably doesn't mean a lot to people, but so it's your granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor. And all that means is it's taking stem cells and making them mature and be able to do their thing. So essentially, when you have this stress, it's increasing the development and maturation of some of these inflammatory products. And the reason that I find that interesting is that, so they talk about it in the paper related to social isolation, low socioeconomic status, and these are all things related to environmental justice that we're going to be talking about this week. So I found it really, really fascinating. This is the original article. So it can blow your mind in terms of the number and amount of science. I'm not expecting anyone to necessarily follow along, but it's really important to kind of balance between the public and the science perspectives. But they're telling you exactly what's being upregulated. So you have your cell cycle, you have things related to inflammation, reactive oxygen species, and all sorts of various components there. All right, so is this a mechanism for how stress might be influencing cancer? So this is really interesting to me. This just came out within the past month. So if stress increases inflammatory gene expression via epigenetics, is that maybe influencing the increase in copying errors, and that might be influencing why you're having increased risk of cancer? We don't know. So just a fun little piece to kind of put in the back of your head. So science is fun, don't forget.